It's March 1922, and Crescens Riga, the maid, has been working for the Gruber family for a while now. For Riga, this was not really the warmest household, but it was bearable. It was only when the last couple of weeks started to get strange. She started feeling constantly watched in the house, even when she was alone, hearing sounds of footsteps in the attic or noises in the middle of the night when everyone was supposedly asleep. She constantly complained about her frightening experiences to the owners, though they usually didn't take it as a big deal. The thing is, she wasn't the only one to feel that way. Andreas, the father or grandfather, while heading to the farm, found a one-way track of footprints from the forest directly to the farm, yet none going back. He felt a little disturbed, but didn't think much of it. He entered the house and found a newspaper from Munich, which he hadn't bought, and neither had any family member. Later, they also noticed that one of the two keys to the farm was missing. The maid, finally unable to take the eerie noises behind the walls and in the attic anymore, quit the job in fear, telling everyone the house was haunted. The next couple of days went by pretty normally. The old maid was replaced with 44-year-old Maria Baumgartner, shy but grateful for the work opportunity, while the family went about their usual daily activities like feeding animals, milking cows, and preparing meals. Victoria went to the nearby town of Schrobenhausen to withdraw money from the bank, while little Cecilia went to school and mentioned to her teacher that her mother had been crying recently and that something had frightened her. What was about to happen the next morning, none of them could have imagined. Days later, the neighbours broke the silence of Hinterkaifeck and found the family and maid hidden beneath the straw in the barn. This is the story of the murders of Hinterkaifeck, one of the most mysterious cases involving the murder of an entire family, while the killer lived among them unnoticed, a case leading to a century-long rabbit hole. The story starts in the Bavarian farmlands of Germany, 70 kilometers north of Munich, specifically at the Hinterkaifeck farm, known for being very isolated, about half a kilometer from the nearest neighbour and even farther from the nearest village. The Hinterkaifeck farm was built in 1863 as a stone, single-storey farmhouse shaped like an L. By 1922, it was already the third generation of the Gruber family operating it, specifically 63-year-old Andreas Gruber and 72-year-old Cecilia. Living with them was their 33-year-old daughter Victoria and her two children, 2-year-old Josef and 7-year-old Cecilia, who was named after her grandmother. Victoria had been a widow since her husband died in World War I. Afterward, she began a relationship with their neighbour Lorenz Schlittenbauer, and they even planned to marry, though her father, Andreas, didn't approve. Later, Lorenz would marry someone else and have a baby, which unfortunately died very young. They were not really a normal family. They were known for keeping to themselves, and the grandfather was frequently discussed in town for his proclivities toward incest, which we'll get back to later in the video. It was Saturday in April 1922 at the primary school in the municipality of Wangen, the school little Cecilia attended 6 days a week, including Saturdays. That day, the teacher noticed Cecilia was absent, but that wasn't unusual since she would often be sick and had seemed very exhausted the day before. So, the teacher led a short prayer with the class for her recovery before moving on with the lessons. Later in the afternoon, two coffee merchants who had to deliver an order to Hinterkaifeck noticed the doors of the property were locked with nobody answering. Listening closer, they heard the sounds of cattle and a dog barking, but otherwise complete silence. So they did what anyone might do in the early 1900s. They went to the neighbouring Schlittenbauer property to inform them that the Gruber family appeared to have vanished. As night fell, a carpenter named Michael Plöckel was passing by the silent Hinterkaifeck. He felt uneasy when he saw smoke from the chimney, meaning the oven was being heated. Suddenly, a stranger approached him and blinded him with a bright flashlight, prompting him to hastily continue on his way. Probably the reason so many were confused by the silence of the Grubers that day, even though they often kept to themselves, was because Saturday was usually a busy day for them, often working on the farm, milking cows, cooking meals and so on. For the farm to be so silent and dark was rather unusual. The next day, the postman passed by and, as usual, stuck the newspaper into the kitchen window. He would usually find many people inside, talking, cooking, eating, and a child who always looked at him from the window. But that day, there was complete silence. Tuesday morning, a mechanic knocked on the door. He had come to repair the broken engine in the barn. When he tried to take a look, he found the garden gate locked, so he went around checking the kitchen and barn windows, but only heard the dog barking inside. The back door was locked as well. He decided to wait near the garden beside an apple tree on the west side, whistling every now and then with his fingers. After an hour of waiting, he was unable to wait any longer and went to the engine shed on the north side, spending 4.5 hours repairing the engine. He was noisy, singing and whistling, and finally started the engine when he was finished. As he walked toward the yard, he noticed the barn door wide open. He got within about 3 meters but didn't enter, then walked away to the front door, where he found the leashed dog, the same one barking earlier, now tied up in front of the door, which was still locked. He later reported to the Schlittenbauer family that he had repaired the engine, but the Grubers seemed not to be there. The mechanic stated that someone was probably already on the property when he arrived, or had entered from the south side of the building while he was working on the engine. During those 4.5 hours, that person must have led the dog from the barn to the front door, tied it up, and opened the west barn door. Lorenz Schlittenbauer likely got the information from his daughters and sent 2 of his sons to check on the Grubers. After walking all the way there, they found nobody and returned empty-handed. Lorenz then decided to lead a search party with 2 neighbors and enter by force. When they arrived, the dog was no longer at the front door and the barn was closed again, which added up since the mechanic had reported it open earlier, so someone must have closed it again with the dog inside. The search party forced open the barn door and found 4 bodies covered with hay. The 2 neighbors proceeded to investigate the front door, while Lorenz continued alone through the barn before catching up and opening the door with a key that had previously been reported missing by the Grubers. Upon entering, they found the maid and little Cecilia, who had met a similar fate. Investigations started and suspicions crept in. But first, let's address the facts. Dr. Johann Baptist Aumüller reported that older Cecilia's body showed signs of strangulation and 7 blows to the head, with a cracked skull. Andreas was caked with blood and had protruding cheekbones from shredded flesh. Victoria's skull was also smashed, with her head showing 9 star-shaped wounds, and the right side of her face struck with a blunt object. Andreas was found with severe head wounds and a shattered skull, likely from the mattock, a pickaxe-like tool with a flat farming blade. Little Cecilia suffered several blows to the head, her lower jaw shattered, not enough to kill her instantly. She most likely suffered a slow death, shown by the fact that she tore her own hair out in pain. Inside the farmhouse, 2-year-old Joseph was found dead in his crib from a single powerful blow that fractured his skull. The maid, who had started working just 1 day earlier, was found in her room with many blows to the head from a blunt object. Joseph was covered with his mother's dress and Maria with her sheets. Those and a couple of other things were the only items that appeared moved. Yet, the killer had stayed for several days, cooking, feeding the animals, and lighting fires in the hearth, seen by the smoke from the chimney. At first, police suspected vagrants or other travelling men of ill repute, but that didn't make sense since the money was untouched, so it must have been someone with a personal vendetta against the Grubers. Suspicion then settled on several men connected to the family due to their domestic troubles. Victoria, as mentioned, was a widow whose husband had died in the war, and afterward she had a relationship with Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Joseph's father was still unidentified. Police believed Lorenz, traumatized by the early death of his baby and unwilling to pay child support for Josef, might have decided to kill the family. But things didn't add up since the killer had stayed many days at the farm, and Lorenz's wife never reported him missing. Those with him during the search found his behavior suspicious, as he seemed nonchalant while viewing and handling the bodies with no visible repulsion. Police questioned him, but were unable to place him conclusively at the crime scene. His behavior was later explained as shock and familiarity with the property from his past relationship with Victoria. Then came another theory, that Victoria's supposedly dead husband, Carl Gabriel, was actually alive and had returned from the war to kill them. This theory fell apart quickly after it was verified that he had been killed in France on December 29th, 1914.
The family and maid were beheaded after the autopsies, their skulls sent to Munich for further study. But during the chaos of World War II, they vanished without a trace. The bodies, headless and silent, were laid to rest in Weidhofen. As the years dragged on, the trail grew colder. Evidence decayed in the Bavarian weather, suspects died off, and the crude forensics of the era left only fragments of truth behind. In 1923, the farmhouse was torn down, perhaps to erase the horror. 3 years later, Schlittenbauer's own home burned to the ground, taking more secrets with it. The investigation was opened, closed, and opened again, until 2007, when the Fürstenfeldbruck Police Academy examined the century-old case one final time. For over 100 years, people have argued about what really happened at Hinterkaifeck. The most chilling theory begins with the family's darkest secret. Josef was said to be the child of Victoria and her own father, Andreas Gruber, a man notorious for violence and incest. Some believe Andreas finally snapped, slaughtered his family, and then took his own life. It would fit. The killer knew the farm and handled the mattock with practiced ease. But Andreas's wounds told a different story. None were self-inflicted, and the weapon was later found hidden in the attic, buried beneath hay. One thing, however, is certain. The murderer knew the property intimately, moved through it without fear, and stayed there for days. Whoever they were, this wasn't the work of a stranger. It was personal. Many point to Lorenz Schlittenbauer, once Victoria's lover, later her enemy. He was forbidden to marry her, forced to pay child support for a son who might not have been his, and humiliated by the rumours that haunted the Gruber family. When the two theories intertwine, a grim possibility surfaces. Days before the killings, little Cecilia appeared exhausted in school and told her teacher her mother had been crying through the night, a crack showing in the family's fragile facade. Perhaps Andreas, in one of his violent rages, killed them all. Then Lorenz, discovering the massacre, may have struck Andreas down in fury. He could have covered the bodies, hidden the mattock in the attic, and walked away.
It's only a theory,
One of many whispered over the years. But one truth remains. The real story of Hinterkaifeck died with those who lived it, buried deep beneath the cold Bavarian soil.